In modern life, it's easy to fall into the trap of constantly comparing yourself to others. Social media is filled with seemingly perfect lives that bombard us, while society pushes us to always want more achievements, more recognition, more validation. But what happens when we base our self-esteem on these illusions? We become slaves to external approval, and what follows is a crushing emptiness. Insecurity takes hold of you, and your self-worth plummets. Have you ever wondered, why, despite having everything, do you still feel inadequate? The truth is harsh. You're sabotaging your own self-esteem by allowing external factors to define you. This is where Stoicism emerges as a radical solution. It's not just a philosophy, it's the key to building self-esteem so indestructible that neither rejection nor criticism nor failure can touch it. Imagine for a moment that no external storm could shake your confidence. It's possible, and it's essential for living with true peace and inner power. If you stay, I will reveal 9 Stoic rules that will not only teach you to overcome this emotional trap, but will help you build a self-esteem that no one and nothing can destroy. Let's take it step by step toward that inner strength. Before we begin, I invite you to follow us and turn on the notification bell if you value the knowledge and wisdom we share. By doing so, you'll always be up to date with new reflections that can transform your life. Let's begin. First rule: recognize that value lies in your character, not in what you own. One of the most common traps when it comes to self-esteem is believing that our value depends on what we own: money, properties, professional success, or even our relationships. But the Stoics, with their clarity about what truly matters, remind us that true value lies in our character, not in our possessions or external achievements. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, said, "Wealth is not having great possessions, but in having few needs." This phrase shows us that value doesn't reside in accumulating things, but in cultivating a strong and virtuous character. By understanding this, we begin to free ourselves from the constant pressure to have more or to compare ourselves to others based on what we do or don't own. This is one of the most important keys to building indestructible self-esteem. Let's think about this for a moment. Material possessions, social status, and even success in our careers are things that can disappear overnight. Economic setbacks, crises, or simply the passage of time can take away what we value. If our self-esteem is tied to these things, it's like building a house on sand. Any change in our circumstances can cause everything to collapse. But if our self-esteem is based on our character, on how we act, and who we are at our core, then no one and nothing can tear us down. The Stoics believed that true success in life was not measured in wealth or recognition, but in living according to virtue. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, expressed that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. This means that what truly defines our value is the quality of our thoughts, our decisions, and our character, not what we own or achieve. If we cultivate a solid character based on wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage, our self-esteem will be unshakable because it will be rooted in something that no one can take from us. Second rule: don't let emotions take control. Stay calm. This is one of the most profound lessons of Stoicism, but also one of the hardest to apply in daily life, learning not to be carried away by our emotions. The Stoics weren't against feeling emotions. We are human, and emotions are part of our experience. But what they taught is that we should not allow those emotions to take control over our actions or how we perceive ourselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." This means that our emotions, which often arise from our interpretations and thoughts about the world, can distort our view of reality and, more importantly, of ourselves. If we're not aware of this, we can easily fall into cycles of anxiety, anger, or sadness, affecting not only our decisions, but also our self-esteem. Imagine you've had a bad day at work or argued with a loved one. Emotions begin to arise: frustration, anger, sadness. If you don't manage these emotions well, it's easy for them to start affecting your self-esteem. But here is where the Stoics offer a powerful alternative. Instead of letting emotions dominate your behavior, stop, observe them, and decide how to respond. Epictetus, another great Stoic philosopher, said, "It's not what happens to you that disturbs you, but how you interpret what happens." This means that the real cause of our distress or insecurity is not what happens to us, but how we react to it. If we learn to control our interpretations and not be dragged down by our emotions, we gain deep inner calm, a calm that is essential for indestructible self-esteem. When you think about those moments when intense emotions like stress or anger have taken over, you've probably felt regret later for acting impulsively. These situations usually undermine our self-esteem because they make us feel like we've lost control. However, when you learn to stay calm in moments of adversity, you begin to feel more secure in yourself. You know that no matter what happens, you have the ability to manage your emotions and respond in a way that reflects who you really are, not just what you feel at the moment. Another important thing the Stoics teach is that emotions aren't bad in themselves, but what we do with them is what truly matters. It's not about suppressing what we feel, but about recognizing those emotions, understanding their origin, and consciously deciding how to act. When you can do this, you develop a confidence in yourself that goes beyond any external circumstance, because you know that you're not a slave to your emotions, you are their master. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic thinkers, summarized it very clearly. Control your anger, or it will control you. This idea applies not just to anger, but to all emotions. If you let fear, sadness, or frustration take the reins, they'll lead you down paths you don't want to go, and this will inevitably affect your self-esteem. But when you can stop, breathe, and consciously decide how to act, you realize you're stronger than you thought. This inner calm is what allows you to maintain solid self-esteem even in the most difficult moments. To apply this key to your life, start by observing your emotions when they arise. Don't judge yourself for feeling them, but don't let them take control either. Pause and ask yourself, am I acting based on this emotion or from a place of calm and reason? That pause gives you the power to choose how to respond. And over time, this practice will help you feel more in control of yourself and therefore more secure in your own worth. Staying calm doesn't mean you never feel intense emotions, but that you learn to manage them in a way that doesn't harm you or others. And when you can do that, your self-esteem strengthens because you know that no matter what happens around you, you have the ability to respond with serenity and wisdom. Third rule, find peace in the impermanence of things. One of the hardest realities to accept in life is that everything changes. Nothing is permanent. People come and go, situations get better or worse, and what brings you joy today may disappear tomorrow. For the Stoics, accepting the impermanence of things was fundamental to achieving inner peace. And when you understand this, you begin to develop a self-esteem that doesn't depend on external things, because you realize those things are temporary. Marcus Aurelius explained it perfectly when he said, "Observe how all things are in perpetual change. Nothing is enduring." For the Stoics, the world is in constant flux, and fighting against this reality only causes suffering. If you base your self-esteem on something as fragile as the stability of the things around you, your possessions, your status, your relationships, you're building your worth on something that will inevitably change. Impermanence isn't just a part of life, It's what makes life what it is. So how does this affect your self-esteem? If you accept that everything changes, you free yourself from the fear of losing what you have. When you stop clinging to the idea that something has to last forever to be valuable, your self-esteem is no longer affected by the losses or changes that inevitably occur. Accepting impermanence means accepting that what happens outside of you doesn't define who you are. And that gives you incredible freedom. Imagine you go through a breakup, lose a job, or experience disappointment. These are tough situations that, if not handled well, can shatter your self-esteem. But if you remember that everything is impermanent, including difficult moments, you can find peace even in the midst of pain. You know that things will change, and what hurts you today will be just a memory tomorrow. This kind of acceptance not only protects your self-esteem, but it helps you maintain calm and perspective in the toughest moments. Epictetus summed it up in a powerful phrase: "Don't cling to anything that you wouldn't let go of calmly." This is a fundamental key to indestructible self-esteem. If you cling too tightly to external things, you become vulnerable to the inevitable changes of life. But if you develop the ability to let go and accept that things come and go, you become stronger internally. Your worth no longer depends on what you have, but on who you are in every moment, regardless of circumstances. Accepting impermanence doesn't mean you don't care about the people or things you love. It's about recognizing that everything has its time and place, and when that time passes, you can let go without it affecting your sense of personal worth. This not only protects you from fragile self-esteem, but gives you a serenity that is hard to attain any other way. You understand that change is part of life, and instead of fighting against it, you flow with it. When you apply this key in your daily life, you start to see situations differently. Instead of clinging to what you think should be permanent, you embrace the beauty of the present moment, knowing that nothing lasts forever. This allows you to enjoy what you have now more fully, without the constant fear of losing it. And when things change or end, you no longer feel destroyed, because your worth doesn't depend on those things. Your self-esteem remains intact because you understand that everything is part of life's natural flow. If you've made it this far because you want to build indestructible self-esteem, comment "I am indestructible" to reaffirm your commitment to personal growth and inner strength. This is just the beginning of your journey towards solid confidence and unstoppable inner power. Join us as we discover together the 9 Stoic rules that will help you forge indestructible self-esteem. Let's move forward. 4th rule: be the master of your thoughts. Controlling your mind is the key to inner power. The Stoics insisted on the idea that what truly defines our life experience is not external events, but how we interpret and react to them. In other words, what happens outside of you is neutral. What matters is what you think about it. Epictetus put it very clearly when he said, "It's not things that upset us, but our opinion about them." This phrase carries immense depth because it reminds you that while you can't control what happens in the world, you do have the power to control how you perceive it. And when you become the master of your thoughts, you begin to see that many of the things that used to deeply affect you actually don't have the power to do so unless you give it to them. How does this relate to self-esteem? It's simple. Your self-esteem is often directly connected to the thoughts you have about yourself. If you constantly tell yourself that you're not good enough, that you fail, or that you lack the value others have, it's inevitable that your self-esteem will suffer. But if you take control of those thoughts and replace them with a more constructive narrative, you begin to build a solid self-esteem based on a more realistic and healthy perception of yourself. The reality is that day to day, our mind is constantly generating thoughts, some positive and some negative. The Stoics invite us to pay attention to those thoughts and not be automatically carried away by them. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." This means that if you strive to maintain constructive, calm, and reality-based thoughts, your self-esteem will benefit greatly. But here's an important point. Being the master of your thoughts doesn't mean ignoring negative thoughts or forcing toxic positivity. Rather, it's about observing your thoughts objectively without judging or clinging to them. If a negative thought arises, like, "I'm not enough," instead of simply accepting it as truth, you can stop, examine it, and ask yourself, does this thought truly reflect reality? Is it helping me, or is it limiting me? This simple act of questioning your thoughts changes the game. You realize that not every thought that crosses your mind is true, and that you have the power to choose which ones to keep and which to let go of. This control over your thoughts gives you tremendous power over your inner life, because you're no longer a victim of them, you're the architect of them. Seneca also reminded us of the importance of not getting caught up in negative thoughts. Man suffers more in imagination than in reality. Often the thoughts that cause us pain aren't based on what's actually happening, but on our erroneous or distorted interpretations of events. By taking control of those thoughts, you can reduce unnecessary suffering and maintain more balanced self-esteem. To apply this key in your daily life, start by paying attention to the thoughts that arise when you face challenges or situations that make you doubt yourself. Are these thoughts empowering you, or are they limiting you? If it's the latter, don't automatically accept them. Ask yourself if those thoughts are truly useful, and if they aren't, replace them with a more realistic or constructive perspective. This doesn't mean you ignore difficulties or convince yourself that everything is fine when it's not. Rather, it's about training your mind to see things more objectively and not allowing negative thoughts to take control without questioning them. When you become the master of your thoughts, you realize that you have much more power than you thought. You can't control everything that happens in life, but you can control how you interpret those situations. And that gives you incredible inner strength, because your self-esteem is no longer at the mercy of life's ups and downs. It's based on your ability to consciously manage your own thoughts. Fifth rule, the fear of failure, an obstacle to building self-esteem. The fear of failure is one of the most common and paralyzing emotions we all experience at some point in our lives. We're terrified of not meeting expectations, of failing in the eyes of others, or worse, of failing in our own eyes. However, for the Stoics, failure wasn't something to be feared. On the contrary, they saw it as an invaluable opportunity to grow, learn, and strengthen ourselves. Epictetus said it very simply but profoundly. Training is hard to endure, but afterwards we carry life like victors. What this means is that failure, like tough training, is part of the process that prepares you to face life's challenges. If you avoid failure, you're denying yourself the chance to improve and develop a self-esteem that's truly indestructible. The key is not to avoid failure, but to change your relationship with it. Instead of seeing it as something negative, start seeing it as a teacher, as an inevitable part of growth. Stoicism teaches us that real value doesn't lie in how many times we avoid failing, but in how we respond when we do. If every time you face a setback you stop to lament, your self-esteem will suffer because your perception of yourself will be conditioned by immediate success. But when you realize that each failure is just one more step in your growth, your self-esteem doesn't waver. In fact, it strengthens. Seneca said it this way: "He who has learned to die has unlearned to be a slave." In this context, to die could be interpreted as learning to fail without fear, because once you free yourself from the fear of failure, you're no longer a slave to it. You stop living with that constant pressure to be perfect or to always succeed. And when you free yourself from that pressure, you discover you can do much more than you thought. How does this affect your self-esteem? It's simple. If your self-esteem depends on never failing, it will be fragile, because failure is inevitable. But if you accept that failure is part of the process, your self-esteem becomes much stronger because you understand that your value isn't determined by a single outcome, but by your ability to get up, learn, and keep going. In other words, your self-esteem stops being an all or nothing based on success and starts being a reflection of your resilience and personal growth. Sixth rule: gratitude, the key to strengthening self-esteem. In modern society, it's easy to fall into the trap of always wanting more success, more money, more recognition. We live in a world that constantly bombards us with the idea that we must keep seeking what we don't have to be happy. However, for the Stoics, true strength and self-esteem weren't found in what you have yet to achieve, but in learning to appreciate and be grateful for what you already have. Seneca said, "It's not the lack of what we have that makes us unhappy, but the lack of gratitude for what we already have." This simple truth is key to building solid self-esteem. When you live in a constant state of dissatisfaction, believing that you need more to feel valuable, you're perpetually unfulfilled. That dissatisfaction erodes your self-esteem because it always seems like something is missing to feel whole. But when you practice gratitude, when you really take the time to value what's already present in your life, your perspective changes completely. Gratitude isn't just a warm feeling, it's a powerful practice. By reflecting on the things you have now, your health, your relationships, your achievements, even the small everyday things, you realize that you're already valuable enough. The need for external validation decreases because you learn to see the value in what you've already accomplished, in who you are today. Marcus Aurelius also spoke of this in his Meditations, when he invited us to receive everything that comes in life as if you had wished for it. This doesn't just apply to external circumstances, but also to what you already have in life. The problem is that we often take for granted what we have because we're too focused on what's missing. But when you take the time to recognize what's already in your life, you realize that you have more than you thought, and your self-esteem is nourished by that sense of abundance. How does gratitude affect your self-esteem? It's simple. When you're constantly in a state of lack, thinking about what you don't have, you inevitably start to feel like you're not enough. But when you focus on what you already have, you realize you don't need more to be valuable. You're fine just as you are, and that feeling of wholeness gives you much stronger self-esteem. Seventh rule: emotional independence, cultivating solid self-esteem. One of the fundamental pillars of Stoicism is the idea that our happiness and well-being shouldn't depend on external factors, and this includes our emotions, especially those related to other people. The Stoics teach us not to depend emotionally on what others think, say, or do, because in the end, we don't have control over them. If we base our self-esteem on others' validation or affection, we're building on unstable ground. Epictetus summed it up very clearly. He who is too concerned with what others think will always be their slave. This is true because when our emotions depend on others' opinions or how they treat us, we're giving away our power and, with it, our self-esteem. We become hostages to the circumstances and people around us. But if we cultivate emotional independence, our self-esteem strengthens because it's no longer tied to what others think or do. This doesn't mean we should be indifferent or emotionally disconnected from the people around us. In fact, the Stoics deeply valued human relationships and compassion. What they advocated was the idea that our emotions and personal worth shouldn't depend entirely on those relationships. In other words, you can enjoy and value others without depending on them to feel complete. How does this affect your self-esteem? If you're always seeking approval, affection, or validation from others, your self-esteem will be at stake, fluctuating depending on how others treat you or what they think of you. But when you develop emotional independence, your worth no longer depends on external approval. You know who you are, and you don't need others to confirm it. This gives you a solid foundation on which to build your confidence and security. Marcus Aurelius also spoke about this in his Meditations. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, not on external circumstances. This includes our relationships. If you allow your happiness or sadness to depend on how others treat you, you'll be on an emotional roller coaster. But if you decide that your inner well-being is something you control, you become much stronger. And this directly reflects on your self-esteem. One of the most practical ways to cultivate emotional independence is to observe your reactions when you feel hurt, rejected, or misunderstood by someone. How does it affect you? Does your self-esteem take a hit? If so, ask yourself, why am I allowing this person or this situation to determine my worth? This simple act of questioning helps you become aware of where you're placing your emotional power, and more importantly, allows you to take it back. When you practice emotional independence, you begin to realize that the real control is yours. You can't control what others think of you, how they treat you, or whether they accept you, but you can control how you choose to interpret those situations and how you allow them to affect you. This is one of the greatest acts of liberation you can do for your self-esteem. This doesn't mean you'll never feel hurt or disappointed by others. We're human, and emotions are inevitable. What the Stoics teach us is that we shouldn't get stuck in those emotions or allow them to define our personal worth. You can feel the pain, but you can also remind yourself that this pain doesn't define who you are. 8th rule: learn to let go of what no longer serves you. The key to freeing your mind and strengthening your self-esteem. One of Stoicism's greatest lessons is the ability to let go. The Stoics understood that clinging to what no longer serves you, whether thoughts, relationships, objects, or expectations, is one of the main causes of suffering. Learning to let go isn't just a matter of superficial detachment, but a deep way to free your mind and strengthen your self-esteem. By letting go of the unnecessary, you create space for what truly matters. Epictetus summed it up brilliantly: do not seek for things to happen as you wish them to happen, but rather wish that what happens, happens as it does, and you will be happy. Often we cling to ideas of how things should be, how others should behave, or what we should have achieved to feel valuable. But when these expectations aren't met, they can wear down our self-esteem, making us feel like we've failed or that we're not enough. The act of letting go isn't an act of resignation, but one of wisdom. Recognizing that some things, situations, or people no longer have a positive purpose in your life, and letting them go is an act of strength, not weakness. By letting go, you take control of your life because you're no longer chaining yourself to what you can't change or what's holding you back. This, of course, has a direct impact on your self-esteem. How does letting go affect your self-esteem? When you cling to what no longer serves you, whether old beliefs, toxic relationships, or goals that are no longer relevant, your self-esteem suffers because you're holding on to something that limits you. But when you learn to let go, you free yourself from those unnecessary burdens and regain your energy. You realize you don't need to carry everything, and you can move forward lighter and more confident in yourself. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, said, "Remove the opinion and the complaint is gone. Remove the complaint and the suffering is gone." This reflects the idea that what often causes us distress isn't what happens, but how we cling to certain expectations or ideas. When you learn to let go of those expectations and accept reality as it is, you begin to feel an inner peace that strengthens your self-esteem, because you no longer feel enslaved by what should be, but accept what is and work with it. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care about anything. It means that you consciously choose where to give your energy and what to leave behind. Maybe it's a relationship that's no longer healthy, a job that no longer fulfills you, or a belief about yourself that limits you. By letting go of these things, you take back control of your life and give yourself the opportunity to grow. And with that growth, your self-esteem flourishes. Another important thing about the act of letting go is that it's not always something you do all at once. Sometimes it's a gradual process. You might find yourself holding on to certain emotions or thoughts without even realizing it. But the more you practice letting go, the easier it becomes. And with each thing you let go of, you become more aware of what truly matters in your life. Seneca also invites us to reflect on this when he says, "Life is long if you know how to use it." Part of knowing how to use it is not wasting your time and energy on things that no longer bring you value. If you cling to what's holding you back, you'll never be able to move forward lightly toward what truly matters to you. But when you let go of what doesn't serve you, you realize that life is full of possibilities and your self-esteem is strengthened by that sense of freedom. Ninth rule: the power of living in the present. How to free your mind and strengthen your self-esteem. One of the most important principles of Stoicism is the ability to live fully in the present without worrying about the future or lamenting the past. The present is all we really have, and learning to focus on the now is key to developing indestructible self-esteem. When we worry too much about the future, our minds become filled with fears and anxieties about things that may never happen. This consumes a great deal of mental and emotional energy, weakening our self-esteem and our ability to enjoy the present moment. Marcus Aurelius expressed it very simply but powerfully. Trust the present. Everything else is beyond you. This means that, although the future is uncertain and we often can't control it, we can control how we live in the present moment. By focusing on what you can do today, instead of worrying about what might happen tomorrow, you begin to regain control of your life, and with it, your self-esteem strengthens. How does focusing on the present affect your self-esteem? When you're constantly worried about what's going to happen in the future, you disconnect from the only moment that truly matters, now. And when you neglect the present, you also neglect the opportunity to act effectively to build a better life. Stoicism teaches us that the best way to prepare for the future is by acting wisely and with focus in the present. Epictetus, another great Stoic thinker, said, "It's not the burden that breaks you, but the way you carry it." This Stoic approach invites us to take control of our lives today, instead of worrying about what might happen tomorrow. The future is just a series of present moments yet to come. If you focus on doing your best in the present, you'll be better prepared to face whatever comes without having to carry the anxiety that uncertainty produces. This change in perspective allows you to live more fully in the present. And when you do, your self-esteem strengthens because you're no longer tied to future expectations or outcomes. Instead of being a victim of your circumstances or what might happen, you become the author of your own life, making conscious decisions that reflect the best of you in every moment. Living in the present doesn't mean ignoring the future. It's important to clarify that living in the present doesn't mean neglecting the future or not having plans. Rather, it's about not letting worries and expectations about the future stop you from enjoying and making the most of the present moment. True happiness and strong self-esteem arise from knowing that, no matter what the future holds, you have the ability to handle the present effectively and wisely. Seneca reminds us, true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence on the future. This philosophy teaches you to let go of anxiety and expectations that so often keep us trapped in the what will happen, so that we can fully live the what is happening. Practical application: how to focus on the present. To bring this lesson into your daily life, practice mindfulness. Every time you notice your mind getting ahead of itself, worrying about what might happen, pause and ask yourself, what can I do now that is truly under my control? This simple question will help you refocus your energy on the present and act effectively today, instead of wasting your time and energy anticipating problems that don't yet exist. When you learn to live in the present, you discover a new freedom and greater confidence in yourself. Your self-esteem no longer depends on what might happen, but on how you choose to act and respond to what you have before you at this moment. This is one of Stoicism's most powerful lessons, and its practical application will help you strengthen your self-esteem in a lasting way. At the end of the day, the real question is, how willing are we to let go of external expectations and start building from within? We live in a world that constantly tells us how we should be, what we should achieve, and what success means. But what if true strength lies in what can't be seen, in that unshakable calm that only we can cultivate? Stoicism invites us to challenge that external voice, to embrace uncertainty, and to find value in our response to it. Is it possible that your greatest power doesn't lie in what you achieve, but in how you choose to face it all? Perhaps the answer isn't in a final goal, but in every step you take to forge self-esteem that, regardless of what happens, remains firm. The reflection doesn't end here. Are you ready to keep questioning, building, and transforming yourself from within? Only you can decide. I'm excited to hear your stories of overcoming challenges on this topic. Share your victories, your struggles, and your experiences. If you don't know what to comment, write, "I forge my strength," to show that you've completed our session. Your voice is essential here. Each reflection strengthens and elevates our community, reflecting the true value of each individual and contributing to our shared Stoic identity. We'll see you in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we'll continue exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. Now take the opportunity to expand your understanding of Stoicism with new recommended sessions. Until we meet again, remember, you are the only master of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible.